It were all right.
It were all right. Right, let's do. Let's.
I'm not gonna rise to your kind of adoration for it. It was a good
It was the
try,
gold.
but
It was the
I've
golden
seen better.
edge at
A
its
golden edge.
shiniest
Well,
best. Do you have anything else to talk about on this one? The only other sort of highlight moments I can think of was Ryan Sutton stopped that Harvey Levett try. That would have been a try. That was a great covering tackle. And Sam Tompkins made a couple of big defensive interventions in the game, which probably is what edged him the man of the match because his attack was really good. His organisation, his chat non-stop, sorting things out. But it was the pull back on. I want to say it was Charnley who he covered across and got in front of, and it was Lynham who'd made a break nearly, and Tompkins just grabbed the back of his shirt and pulled
yes.
him down. And those two moments were kind of when Warrington got a head of steam up because they were running down the hill, and and Sam just managed to cover those two plays nicely, and he read the situation really well on the Murdoch Masilla break as well. When he passed it to Kevin Brown, he kind of covered all the options really well there and knew where he was
Well,
and what he had to do to make sure the
yeah,
supporting players got around him. So defensively
he
he performed
did.
fantastically as well as in attack. Sam Tompkins. That's probably what got him man of the match in this one in the end.
The the trouble with the Murdoch Masilla break was that that he obviously bust you wide open, and he passed to a player that was slower than him, which which was the problem. He kind of, in my opinion, I understand why, because if he doesn't pass, he gets accused of being greedy and whatever. But the player, he wasn't the right player looming up on the side of him, was he? He was, he wasn't the right speedster. You want a winger or a centre on your side. You don't want an aging standoff on your inside on that case. But yeah, there you go.
No, you don't. Okay. Individual stats. Liam Marshall with a try assist 150 metres. He keeps banging in the tries against Warrington, so we'll enjoy seeing that forevermore. John Bateman with a try, 5 tackles, 118 metres. Tom Davies with a try and 107 metres. Liam Farrell with a try assist uh, and 196 metres. Lovely and Farrell. That
That's all
his
right, isn't
try
it?
assist was on
That's all
Sam
right.
Tompkins' try. It was a really good pass that he put in behind Gildart's line. And looking at it live, I thought Gildart maybe had gone into the defensive line a bit, but he hadn't. He'd run a really sharp, powerful, fast line that the defenders all fell for basically. And Sam Tompkins got up off his slip, didn't he, and scored the try with Charnley waving around in the background, falling down. It was a beautiful sight to behold. Uh, on the Warrington side of things, Josh Charnley was one of their stronger performers though, and he did work hard. 144 metres to no avail try wise, and Ben Murdoch Masilla got 100 metres, most of it on that break that we just spoke about before. So it's good stuff there. We're going to move on to the last game of Saturday, the game that had out of focus pictures abusing Leeds Rhinos constantly on the Instagram feed, but we'll let him off because he sponsors the show. And he's really pushed his sponsorship cachet this week with his match review that we'll get to shortly. It was the same score as the second game, but it was Castleford and Leeds this time matching up, and it was 38-10 to the Tigers. It was 22-0 at half time, so they were dominating throughout this one. Chris Kendall was the man with the whistle, and the fan reviews start with a Leeds fan who didn't watch the full game.
so, so Bruiser says, I turned it off with a minute left to go. If I don't see the final score, there's no proof that it happened. Yeah, nice try.
Okay, Dr. Hideous said Leeds were a shit sandwich right from the start and looked tired with just half an hour gone. Cass, on the other hand, were playing, if not last season's champagne rugby, but at least a good off-brand bubbly.
Yeah, maybe a cheap carver from the offing, maybe. So yeah, but they didn't need to be much better than that. But anyway, so John Hamilton says, lots of talk about how good Cass were, but although I'm biased, it was Leeds being awful that was the biggest factor. Completion rate looked awful and offered almost nothing in the way of structured attack. Disappointed with McDermott's comments about injuries after the game. Lots of teams have long injury lists but can still get to the end of a set. Fair point.
Mark Butler said, when Leeds beat Cass by 1,000,000 points in the playoffs, this is going to be a bit galling, isn't it?
Hey, they all count. So Rich Wilkinson says, not a lot to say really. Max said it perfectly. A really soft performance. Leeds have gone off the boil big time. We need to be better at every part of the game if we're going to win some games.
Yeah, Fat Boy
Fair
Rob,
point.
with his, like I said, pushing the boundaries of his sponsorship. But he is a great contributor to the show, so I've let him off this week. He says, "What a venue, what a weekend, and what a match! The real champions pummeled the chumps from the big city and dominated in every department: attack, defence, kicking, catching, tackling, shirt design, streaking, loudness of fans, speed at the bar, you name it, we won it." The game was over before half-time after Jai went round Watkins as if he wasn't there. Foster ran a line Zach would have pounced on, and Morse casually carried the ball and forced so-called tacklers to the line. We had some flawless Ellis goal kicking. It meant the party could start early. After the excitement of the streaker making more yards than the entire Leeds team, Shenny went over with less than a minute into the second half, and the fun really began. Watts put Milner in under the sticks for Ollie Holmes set off like a train to round things off. Allegedly scored for Leeds and celebrated like he'd scored the winning try at Wembley, and Ferris got Leeds to 10. 10 more than they deserved. Then the party really began, with an SLP meet-up that included numerous victory selfies, Grandad John out supping all of us, and a meet-up of podcast heavyweights in the chicken cottage, with Mark reminding Mr. Gary Schofield he won fuck all. Not quite Anchorman, but still a great end to the day.
There you go.
I'll give you this about Gary Schofield. He definitely is a good sport about all the banter and all the jokes and all that sort of stuff. It was a wonderful sport when we ran into him. I know he takes some stick and he deserves some of what he takes, but he's a good sport about it. So that's the one thing that I'll remember from Saturday night meeting him.
I'll just regale you about this because Anna and I were just talking about this before the podcast started. Because we were talking about doing the recording and stuff, and I mentioned Gary, and she said, "I'm sure he used to live behind us." So she got her phone out and texted her brother and said, "Did Gary Schofield live behind us?" And yeah, apparently he did. He used to live where they used to live in Rothwell.
Ah.
Apparently, but when he was in his pomp with Leeds.
When he was in his pomp with Leeds before his chicken cottage days.
Yeah, before his numerous chicken cottage visit days. Yes. Whilst he was still a Leeds legend and still in Rich's heart.
Well, he's in the Hall of Fame for Leeds now, so he'll forever be a Leeds legend. Mark W. I'll roll on with this. This game can be summed up by the fact that it took Leeds almost an hour to match the streakers' try count. Leeds not at their best, but even so, Castle looked really good. Full credit to them. You nipped off home by this stage, so when you watched the game back, did the streaker get any TV coverage, or was it just the photographs we saw of his not so proud tackle?
Just the photos. No, we didn't get treated to it.
Right. Let's make a streaker segue then before we move on to the next review. So he comes onto the pitch. Barely, he's got boxes on. He's not a full streaker, which is something that Sarah had to explain to Joshua that wasn't the proper streaking etiquette. I'm not sure that he'd experienced a streaker before. Obviously, does the full length with a ball. He must have robbed off one of the ball boys sat by the side of the pitch. Up the hill as well. He runs up the hill. He gets to the top end and he goes to dive. And now the pitch was pretty dry and pretty hard. I thought, like, a lot of the kicks were bounced up quite high and stuff. So obviously he didn't
get any water in, did it, during between the games? Or
and he hadn't picked up on this. He's obviously been too busy watering himself to realise that it's yeah. So he goes for the slide over, and he ends up double movement, dropping the ball, not even scoring the strike. I think I wouldn't have given it.
No, it'd have gone up as a no try. You mean?
I'd have absolutely loved it if Chris Kendall had run up and done and gone for the square in the end. It would have been absolutely class if it had done that. So basically, we thought that was it. The streaker, as they do nowadays, has their fun, then give themselves up to the stewards. So he climbs over the hoardings at the other end and basically gives himself up to the stewards.
Yeah.
And or so we think. And then he jokingly goes to sidestep one of the stewards, and thought this lad might not be done yet. Anyway, so just as they're about to start walking him out of the ground, he opts back over the advertising boardings, back onto the pitch, gets all the way up to the halfway line again, does a bit of a dummy and stutter step, gets around, uses a couple of the players as like decoys, and manages to step
Yeah.
around to keep his run going for a little bit longer. Then the security take a bit more of a serious stance with him and tackle him to the ground and haul him off and out of the stadium for his fine and his lack of re-entry into the stadium. Rob said he saw his mate who had the clothes in the consent going, "What am I going to do with these?" And everyone was like, "Just leave him."
Well, he'll be fine. He's not going to need them.
Yeah, but boy, that guy, it was quite entertaining, to be honest. But there you go.
There you go.
Sarah.
Yes, finally. So Sarah says, cast without so many players, especially Gale, we're not going to put up much of a fight. Think again. McDermott said big guns were missing. They went missing during the match. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit rich to start talking about missing players when you've got, Shenton playing at fullback who, he's not in the first flush of youth anymore, is he? So, the Cass had, obviously they were missing their first choice 6 and 7, and they were mixing and matching as well. So it's a bit rich when everyone's going in varying ways.
Yeah, there's basically Saints and Wigan and Warrington aren't, and then everyone else is having a bit of things, aren't they? That's certainly a fair assessment of how it's working. So. Right, okay, so. We now move on to Tim G Radio, who says, enjoyable game as a neutral, although the injury to Watkins was a massive shame given how good he's been this season. A different view on the streaker to my entertained, pissed up in the stands view of it. He says, if tits keep getting on the pitch, we'll end up like football with no drinking and segregated stands. Why bother? I mean, for our entertainment, is why bother. But yeah, no, it is the second high-profile instance of a streaker this season that we've had to talk about. But I don't know, 1 or 2 a year. I think the thing is not trying to get involved with the players in any way and that sort of stuff, which is handy, because if they started messing around to that extent, I think then you talk about player safety and things like that, and then you do have to stamp down on things. It is just you expect a streaker at Magic Weekend, don't you?
I mean, you put 38,000 kind of fans. Most of them have had more than a couple of ales, and obviously he prepared for it. He'd obviously prepared for it with his undergarments. He obviously knew what he was doing.
He hadn't prepared. This guy was I think this guy was let's have it. We're hammering Leeds at half time. It's hilarious. Let's have it. I think. To be honest.
All right. Well, in either case, when you've got that number of people, and that this kind of thing can happen. Maybe it just caught the stewards unaware, because I'd found them particularly relaxed and kind of very. Accommodating as kind of, you're not always sure when you go to football grounds what the kind of guys are going to be like. But I thought they were, very, kind of.
Well, Dom told us a story of basically the Saints during the Leeds game. The Saints fans that were left and the Leeds fans were having a bit of a sing to each other, sort of taking the mick out of each other in various ways and that sort of thing. And the stewards rushed up to go and see what was going on, realised that they were just singing to each other and having a laugh, and no one was pointing angrily or throwing things at each other, and it wasn't a football crowd. And then they all thought, oh, what do we do now? We don't have to do anything. so yeah, most of the weekend was like that, thankfully. Cutthroat Jake, what did he have to say?
Yes, he says, we were disrupted by injuries, but that doesn't excuse how shit we were. Whilst Myler was off, we were a one-man team with everyone passing to Moon and expecting him to do everything. The sort of tactics we used to follow in the 80s, but Moon, whilst good, isn't in the same league as Schofield was back then. It didn't work then, it's not working now. We need a new plan, or a new man with a plan.
Ollie Smith says, well, that result was unexpected. First time I've seen us live this year and didn't go into the game with much expectation. A scrappy first 15 minutes from both sides, but we soon started playing and never looked back from there. Foster, Holmes and Milner were excellent. I thought the halves controlled things nicely. Leeds never turned up, and Brian Mack comments at the end were pathetic.
There you go.
this was the most drunk I was for any of the games, so I have vague sort